would you like to improve your health and keep your family safe? You're listening to the Healthy Home Hacks Podcast, where we firmly believe enjoying optimal health shouldn't be a luxury. Healthy Home Authorities and husband and wife team Ron and Lisa will help you create a home environment that will level up your health. It's time to hear from the experts. Listen in on honest conversations and gain the best tips and advice. If you're ready to dive in and improve your well-being and increase your energy, you're in the right place. All right, here are your hosts, biobiologists, authors, media darlings, vicarious vegans, and avocado aficionados, Ron and Lisa Barris.
When health is absent, wisdom cannot reveal itself. Art cannot become manifest. Strength cannot be exerted. Wealth is useless, and reason is powerless. Herophilus.
We talk a lot about toxins on this show, 75 episodes and counting. But some people still don't understand that in order to achieve optimal health, changes to diet and lifestyle are necessary. As our guests today are here to explain, the United States has no governing body that regulates toxins in building products. According to them, we are at the mercy of the free market to act as the guardians of our health when it comes to our built environment.
It turns out they're right. According to the Journal of Environmental Technology, the average home contains 400 chemicals. A study found that dust in the average home is laced with 45 chemicals, and indoor air, on average, is 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air. And that's according to the EPA.
Our guests today are the co-authors of Pretty Good House, a guide to help you think through the critical issues of weather protection, air leakage, insulation, comfort, and vapor control to ensure that all the important questions are answered before breaking ground.
Chris Briley is a principal at Briley Architecture for Life, specializing in sustainable design. He is a certified passive house consultant. He is a co-host of Green Architects Lounge podcast and a founding board member of Passive House Maine. Chris is passionate about sustainability and is known for his expertise in high-performance buildings.
Emily Mottram is the founder and principal of Mottram Architecture, a boutique practice specializing in new homes and renovations that are beautiful, functional, comfortable, healthy, and durable. She received her Bachelor of Architecture from Penn State University and is a registered architect in Maine, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania.
Emily also teaches building science and sustainable design at community college and co-hosts live-streamed BS and Beer Show, a monthly building science show. She is also a certified passive house consultant. Emily and Chris, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
We are so excited to have you both with us today. And I know we just want to dive right in. So guys, what are some common toxic materials that our listeners should avoid when they're renovating or building their home?
Great question. Emily, you want to take this one or you want?
I think either one of us could probably answer that. But if your building material is being asked to do something that seems like it inherently shouldn't do, mold resistant, stain resistant, it probably is not healthy and has some kind of toxic chemical in it to perform that action.
I love how you said that. If this is something that doesn't normally happen, it's probably a toxic chemical causing a problem, right? I love that.
It's sort of like trigger words. Like if you hear flame retardant, you have to ask yourself, why are they telling me it's flame retardant?
Yeah.
I mean, or shouldn't we be using some?
Yeah, antimicrobial, right? You see that a lot. And you think people who are very paranoid about getting sick and germs, oh, that's great. They don't know that those are really toxic. Those topical applications, like you said, flame retardants, obviously, that can go beyond building products and into your sheets and your bedding and your furniture and your mattress and your children's products. And so.
Yeah. And it's definitely worth thinking about when you're building as well. I mean, a lot of people think about these things about their products that they bring into the house. But when you're building or renovating your house, I mean, you are building the environment that you're going to reside in for most of your time. So it's really important to really be observant then.
Right. I mean, our homes should be our sanctuary. And it's like, I'm always blown away with how much emphasis people put on the aesthetics and constantly making sure that your home is looking Instagram worthy, Pinterest worthy at any cost, getting that cheap formaldehyde laden everything and not really even thinking to ask those questions. Is there formaldehyde resins in here? And what kind of like topical treatments that you talked about? How was this wood treated, right?
Right. In fact, we kind of have that ask yourself, is this animal, vegetable, mineral kind of thing with each product we bring in. And we constantly bemoaning the fact that we don't have an FDA label for the things that we buy and build with. Like you can go down to the hardware store, buy it, install it in your house. And we really have the Aaron Brockovich method of enforcing rogue chemicals. And that's like, it's got to be dangerous enough that someone is sick enough to sue somebody that it becomes not profitable for that company to do it, unless they are aware and altruistic about what they're doing and money not being the bottom line. So we kind of count on that.
That was well said. The Aaron Brockovich style, I think that applies to so many things. Like we've had bedding manufacturers on, same thing with mattresses. There's no regulations on the flame retardant chemicals, really. They have to pass a smolder test. They can use whatever they want.
And we have the SPC that will like enforce these regulations that have come to be, but there's no one proactively going out there, as you said in the intro. There's no government body saying these chemicals are bad, don't put them in your building products. It's basically up to us to police ourselves. And so as architects, we take on that role of being that chemical cop. And our clients have different sensitivities and some are not sensitive, but we are trying to reduce that presence.
And everybody's sensitive to a carcinogen, right? I mean, at the end of the day, what would you guys say is the percentage of carcinogens, cancer-causing chemicals that you see in the building materials?
Well, since 80% of all statistics are made up on the spot, I'll say about 15%.
I love it. We're going to quote you on this one. We're going to start quoting you.
Yeah. And I was going to say, too, that if you don't test it or you don't think about it before you put it in your house, you mentioned in the very beginning, there are 400 toxins in our house. So it is really hard to tell once you have all of those materials in your house, what is causing some of those issues. So we've also, I know Chris and I have both worked with chemically sensitive clients, is you could get in and you could have done all the right things. And we can talk about some healthy building materials and still have a client that has a sensitivity to something that you can't identify because you're just not sure. And we don't have a lot of great ways to test these things either. So it becomes that much more important for us to understand all the things we put in beforehand so we can potentially narrow it down to a few things that could be causing it versus, well, it could be any of the 4,000 materials we just put into this brand new structure. And Chris and I are both big proponents for building much more airtight houses. And so now not only are we putting these things in the house, we're trapping it inside with you. So
you're for the airtight houses, even though.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think there's like about 4 places in the book where we make fun of the builder that says a house has to breathe. Because, and everyone says this, people need to breathe.
We're friends with some of those builders, Chris, be gentle.
Well, no, listen, this is what the book is for. I mean, because intuitively they have the right idea. Like a healthy house leaks, but an energy efficient house controls how it leaks. So we provide the air that you breathe using a balanced mechanical ventilation using an energy recovery ventilator. So we are actually hanging on to the energy in the house and even the humidity in the house, but we're bringing in fresh air and we're filtering that air. So we're actually providing way more fresh air into this environment, as opposed to letting it leak through the failures in your building where your insulation becomes your air filter, which you're never going to change. So we can be much more energy efficient by being tighter, airtight, and be healthier by providing that ventilation.
So you're giving that air exchange. So I think the rule of thumb, what is it? Once every hour, you want a full house air exchange. Is that the
depends on
process
who you talk to and whether you're talking to code officials.
Let's make up a stat. Let's make up a stat.
Like for a house, we shoot for 0.3 air changes per hour. That would be to be energy efficient, but then we usually want more. And if we're designing a school, it's 3 air changes per hour.
Well, and I want to add to that too, is what you're talking about with air changes per hour is just how much the shell of our building is leaking. That's not actually talking about the fresh air that we're providing to you with our mechanical systems, which is what we actually want you to breathe inside your structure. So they're actually 2 completely different things that get interchanged as ventilation and how you want all of the air inside your house to be exchanged over a certain amount of time. The ASHRAE 62.2 standard is not written in that same language, so it makes it sound confusing as to providing fresh air for the people that are in there, because your building shell leakage is coming from your basement, you're coming from your attic, coming from cracks in your foundation. Even outside air with a window open is just outside of the building. So depending on where you guys live in the country, of wildfire season or downtown in the city, that air is not terribly fresh either. So your mechanical ventilation with it being through that. So exchanging the air in your building and exchanging the air in your building shell are not interchangeable.
Okay, well, Emily, we'll err on the side of caution.
Yeah, and exchange more.
Let's tell you what, I just wanted to say that. No, thank you. Both.
Air, A-I-R, not E-R-R.
I'm just being funny. Okay, here we go. So actually, in regards to materials though, right? I was going to ask you, what are some of the best materials? I want to make this a trick question. You can't just go to Alaska and build an igloo, or you could. I want to make this a little more difficult. Maybe it's a warmer climate. Maybe it's more of a humid climate. Chris or Emily, what would you do? What building materials are best that you'd recommend for any given situation?
Straw bales available everywhere. Can grow straw absolutely anywhere.
Yeah.
Turn them into panels. You can stack them as bales. You can turn them into panels, which make them easier wall systems. It's natural and sustainable. It actually helps with agriculture because they can use it as a cover crop, which means that they don't put chemicals on it when they grow it, which means when it goes in your wall, it also does not have chemicals in it. So that one's one of my personal favorite right now. And who doesn't love a deep windowsill?
But Emily, isn't that more of a dry climate though? If it's humid, you really can't use it as much, right? So it has to be a real dry.
Nope.
Arizona would work well.
No?
Nope.
No, we've got a company here in Maine that's making them. Croft, we'll give them a shout out.
Yep.
Croft is making compressed straw panels. And it's really about managing the moisture migration through your wall assemblies. I'm going to try not to geek out too much on and nerd out on how that works, but
you're smiling, Chris. I can see you smiling right now. So you seem very excited about this.
Well, yeah, I can't help it. We are so nerdy, but we try to dial back the nerdiness.
We're trying not to be nerdy today.
Yeah.
But we like to use bio-based materials to build with because they sequester carbon, or they're a lot friendlier to the planet, but also they are naturally organic by themselves as long as we don't mess with them. So there's that aspect. But as long as we can control how a building dries, if we can keep the assemblies dry, then we deprive any mold and mildew spores any opportunity for proliferating within the wall system. So you can get a wall system that respires, let's say that, not breathes. A house that respires, built of organic materials, and you've got a great combination. And that works in pretty much most climates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know, are you guys familiar with Paula Baker Laporte?
Not ringing a bell for me. I'm sorry.
Oh, Prescriptions for a Healthy House is their book. And what's the name? Healthy Nest, I think, is the name of their architectural company. They do. It's not straw bale. It's like straw bale. What is the other one? Clay.
Hempcrete?
No.
Hempcrete?
It's clay. Ron, what is it?
I'm forgetting the term. Yeah.
It's similar, but they were in New Mexico for a long time building homes like that there. And they're actually fellow building biologists. I don't know why. I'm going to look it up while we're talking. But anyway, they were all about the overhang, right? If you're going to build that kind of structure, you need a very large overhang, because even in New Mexico, they get snow. And so they kind of educated us on that and how that works. So yeah, even though there's the moisture, if you have the snow not up against the house, it works.
I would think Chris will agree with this, that water is the enemy of all of our buildings, no matter how you build. And so if you pay careful attention to the nerdy building science that we love, you can often do most things in most climates with attention to good water management details.
Mm-hmm.
So Emily, your homes don't have an indoor pool.
I'm not saying that none of the houses
would be open to it.
But I think this actually wasn't one of my houses, but Chris's fellow podcaster did this tiny indoor pool and had ventilation system. And it was like in its own little contained unit. It was like a swimming thing. So I'm not saying it's not possible. It's just a lot more work. So if we could keep the pools outside, that usually makes things much simpler. We feel the same way about intentional indoor fires too. If you can keep them outside, that's also better for your health.
Be a smart homeowner, people. Yeah. So we talked about it a little while ago, some of the trigger words. So if someone's out shopping and they are looking for materials for their home, what are some of the trigger words they could look for that should be wary of?
Well, there's antimicrobial. We've said, is it waterproof? Is it flame retardant? And another thing to think about is, does it change state, like paints? Because that means there's probably a solvent in it. Or if it's a plastic plastics that are made to be rigid and durable, they've got bisphenols in them. And plastics that are pliable usually have phthalates. So, and these are things that are...
And for our listeners who don't know what that is, we've talked about phthalates. They're an endocrine disrupting plasticizer chemical that actually gives flexibility and makes products soft. So vinyl flooring, right? You would have phthalates and vinyl shower curtains and a lot of vinyl. It's used in vinyl. Can also be used to make scents linger. So you can find them in perfumes and scented products, but they're endocrine disruptors. They mess with our hormonal system. So this is a big thing. Like even there was a big study years ago about the vinyl flooring releasing so many phthalates, like the high level, they measured it and they found such high levels. So people, when they're getting a lot of, like we talked about, these illnesses, and they're not connecting that to their environment at all, right? They're thinking always like food, it must be something I ate, or they never think about their environment being linked to hormonal issues for sure, right? No one's connecting those dots. So sorry to interrupt you, but I just
that was all great.
And the bisphenol A and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also the PFAS materials, things that are fluorinated, and you'll find that in like carpets. In fact, this is a stat I've used so many times. I should go back and check and see if it's real. But if there's a stat that makes you not want to use carpet ever again, it's that the average carpet when it's taken out weighs 3 times what it did when it went in.
Ooh,
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
I believe it though.
That grosses me out.
It sounds true. So
it sounds true. Well, the pillow, there's the stat about the pillow. Your pillow weighs 10 pounds more, not 10 pounds, whatever. I'm sorry, twice the weight. It weighs twice the weight after 10 years or something from dust mite droppings and their shedding and all that. And I was like, people said that was an urban myth. No, in fact, there is a study. I think it's University of Ohio or somewhere. Anyway, so I found the study. I was like, yes, that is an actual stat. Yeah, your pillow weighs more because you're shedding the dead skin and the dust mites are eating your dead skin and then their droppings get into your pillow. It's very gross, but that's a fact. You got to change your pillow every 2 years, please, or at least clean it. But so to your point there, the carpet is crazy. I mean, it just houses everything, right? It grabs onto everything.
It does. And even most of them are off the shelf. The bargain brands, they're usually treated. What are they treated with to make them so stain resistant? And so those are probably fluorinated chemicals of some kind. So we just tend to avoid synthetics and plastics as much as possible. But I will say that it depends on, I think that's in general statement. Some clients who are chemically sensitive, I had a client who is very, very sensitive. Like, this is almost like
living in a tent outside kind of type.
Yeah. And in fact, I'll throw them, they're starting an organization called Habitat for Canaries, where we're building her a house that she can live in, but then they're also creating a retreat for people just like her, because the last place you can go when you're diagnosed with something like that is a hospital where there's so many chemicals and everything. But she can't tolerate hydrocarbons of soft woods or the polyoxyphenols that smell so good.
New home smell, right? New home smell.
Well, yeah. But if you think, I have to do a new house with no softwoods, wow, then what are you building it out? So it becomes, we have to find chemicals that work, or it's concrete and steel and uncoated things. It gets very complicated very fast, and they have to be very tested to that individual. But I'm on a tangent, I realize.
No, it's so important because chemically sensitive people, it's a portion of the environment that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, like especially with all the electromagnetic radiation. And we've worked with, Dr. William Ray. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He passed away now, but his center in Dallas, the Environmental Health Center, it's one of the very few places that people can go and stay in a clean room and actually heal. It still exists. I believe it's still run by his team. And then Dr. Lisa Naj, and she's on Martha's Vineyard. She's also an environmental MD who treats so that these people can get their life back because, right, it's really, we've seen it. It's so extreme. They are sensitive to everything. And the only way they can heal is like through massive detoxification. And that has to be done correctly, right? You can't just say, I'm going to avoid stuff for a little bit. It has to be detoxed out of the body. And with the electromagnetic radiation, there's studies showing that it's like magnifying that. So I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that. Would you agree?
Definitely. And I think most people who suffer from any EMF problems also suffer from the chemically sensitive. I have yet to run into someone who doesn't have, if they have one, they tend to have the other to some degree.
Yeah. It's going to be a miserable experience for those people. And I think we've all even had like a level of that with like, oh my gosh, the gas is making me nauseous, the smell of gas, or someone smoking even like across the room, or perfumes, right? And once you stop, I don't wear any perfumes or anything scented. And then like if I'm around someone with strong perfume, I just almost want to fall over, right? It's just
Yes,
for sure. And I know we're focused on the chemically sensitive people, and that's important. It's nice to have hope out there for those people. But I think some of our other listeners are thinking like, wow, I'd love to live in a pretty good house.
Yeah.
I really would like that, but it's expensive. What would be your response to that, Emily?
It doesn't have to be more expensive. I think that it's really a lot of careful planning, one specifically for your climate zone, right? Because we don't talk specifically enough about climate zones and what you should be doing in the areas and what things are available to you in your climate zone. But what we do talk about a little bit in the book is that you can design economics into your project. Chris and I just presented a couple of weeks ago and he said corners cost, and I had never heard him say that before. But like, every dormer, every bump, every jog, all the fancy things that people think they want to add onto their house cost money. But you can build a simple structure that's way healthier for you to live in. You can build a smaller structure. We talk a lot about building what you need, not for future resale value. There's probably somebody who wants what you decide you're going to build. We have a friend who builds tiny homes, and people don't necessarily want tiny homes, but they don't want 2,500 square feet either, which is our national average. And there's not a lot in the middle. And so people are just looking for smaller things. I mean, you look at the people that live in New York City in 400 square feet. There are plenty of people who can live in a small space, but they think American dream, big house, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So be really realistic.
And they're paying a boatload in New York City. They're paying $4,000 for that.
Oh my gosh. They're paying, for 400 square feet, they're paying more than I pay to live in my house, so it's crazy. But I think be really realistic with yourself about what you actually need and what your outcome is, because I think, we're talking about healthy indoor air quality in the last couple of years and all of us being stuck at home, spending that 90% of our time indoors, but now spending that 90% of our time in the same structure. We're spending it in our houses. We're working from home. We're starting to see that effect on people. Is really start to be honest with yourself about what your outcome is, because people are now looking for connection and being able to go out and like, I don't want to clean a 4,000 square foot house. I don't want to manage a 4,000 square foot house. And up here in Maine, I don't want to heat it for sure. And so I think that it doesn't have to be more expensive, and you have to look at both long-term costs. What's it going to cost you to stay there? Because we have a tendency to see the people who build high performance houses stay in them longer because they're so great to live in. You sleep better. They're healthier for you. They're in a great environment. So think about the long-term cost of it, your health, right? We talked about this. People aren't associating their space with their health. But if you start associating those things together, not spending as much time at the doctor, not taking as much time off of work, we have to think about our lives in something that is slightly bigger than what the first dollar cost is for the house that we build.
Well said. What's that saying? Pay the farmer now or pay the doctor later. I mean, we could say that with pay the architect now or pay the doctor later. A lot of it, because you're right. People look at just the cost like right now, and they don't think about, well, how much is that going to cost me later when I've gotten that formaldehyde exposure from these floorboards or kitchen cabinetry or whatever that is.
We talked a little bit about ventilation and air quality. What are some ways our listeners can keep their indoor air healthy?
Well, ventilation is a big component to that. Like there are so many existing houses where there is no ventilation. It is just the leaks in the house, or how many people cook and they never turn on the fan, or how many houses are out there without.
Chris, you're staring at me right now. You just gave me a look when you said that. Or should I read into that or no?
Well, there are grease-laden vapors are pretty toxic to you. So it's like, and we all experience them, but it's just at certain levels, it is a toxin. So introducing real ventilation to a house is one of the greater ways to do that.
Mechanical ventilation.
Ventilation with filtration.
Okay. That's important.
Care,
do you feel like, okay, if you're changing your HVAC filter regularly, do you feel like that's good enough? Or do you think people need a whole house filtration system?
They need a whole house filtration system. They're not the same thing. Your mechanical system is exchanging the air and going around and filtering it, which is great. People who have furnaces are better off than people who have boilers who have no filtration. There are portable air filters that you can use. And I'm going to say this here because I really think that it's important to remind people that you need to not use ionizers and ozone depletion things that absolutely do not want that. So when we say portable air filters, we're talking about just typical HEPA filters. We're talking about maybe a charcoal filter if you do have something, you're experiencing some VOCs, because as Chris was saying, cooking gives off VOCs. Or cookware, if you are like me and you burn things, And to really hit on the point, everybody needs a range vent hood. It needs to be at least 6 inches wider than your range hood. So don't let your kitchen designer convince you otherwise that it looks good with your cabinetry.
Wait, your range hood needs to be 6 inches overlapping your stove?
Correct. It's more about capture area than it is about the actual
I
pool.
don't think I see that often. Yeah, you're right.
No, you don't, but you should. So here we are talking about it needs to be vented to the exterior. And if you never want to cook again in your kitchen, go and watch the BS and Beer episode on kitchen ventilation, where Ross Trethewey, who's an awesome mechanical engineer, basically scares everybody and says you got to use your range vent hood when you're using your toaster. I was like, did he just say toaster? I'm never cooking again.
More reasons to order in.
Or takeout.
Yeah. That's interesting. So many things nobody's thinking about. Okay, so when you guys design a house for a client, do you sway them to use a whole house filtration? That can be a little costly. Is that like, we're not going to build the house if you don't do that, or we're just going to encourage you to do that?
We kind of take a hard line. I don't know. Most people come to us because they want that healthy house.
Okay.
They want
so
that
that's not a hard sell.
It's not like we're fighting that argument much at all.
Okay.
But I think that is something we would probably draw the line on, is not having an ERV or some kind of air, managing the air in the house.
Yeah. So important. What do we take? 23,000 breaths? I don't know. Another stat we all need to look up. We're all off on our stats today.
So before we build this chemically sensitive proof house, right? I'm curious. So you mentioned portable air purifier. Are you brave enough to mention a brand name of one that someone can get right now just so they can feel good about themselves? And like, for example, IQ Air or whatever. Is there a particular go-to one that you recommend temporarily for people?
I don't. Emily, do you have one?
I'm not good on my brand names, but if you want to build a Corso box, those are actually just 4 air filters and a box fan taped on top of it. So if you have clients out there who just need a cheap solution, that's pretty good.
We have a blog post on that, actually, where how to do it. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, actually, that's what an air purifier is, minus all the other hoopla of the carbon filtration, whatever else might be in
some of them have carbon filters, some of them don't. And all of our mechanical engineers out there will want us to tell you to put the right filter in all of your stuff. Don't add a HEPA filter to a system that isn't designed for that kind of filtration, because that's really hard on your systems and it's going to cut down your airflow and you may actually be creating worse problems than you had previously. So
how about a simple question here? So furnace filter, what MERV rating would you recommend? At least 13, or would you go even higher?
Higher, the better, right? I mean,
well, I'm just saying, what's the recommendation? I'm just curious. What?
At least 13 is usually what is the standard.
And for listeners, we do have our recommended air purifier brand. So I'll put a link to that, portable air purifier brands.
You can say it.
Depending on your budget, obviously, they range anywhere from 100 up to 1,000 and everything in between, and depending on the square footage. So because people always say, which one's the best one? Well, it does depend on your needs and your budget. But anyways, so I had a question for you guys. Do you use fiberglass insulation, or you don't use insulation? Do you only do the straw bale homes?
Oh, we definitely use insulation. Definitely.
A lot of it.
I was like, how is it going to airtight? What's their miracle cure for this?
I mean, if you can only do one thing, make it as tight as possible. But yeah, we definitely use lots of insulation.
Okay, I found the answer to my question. The Paula Baker homes, they're straw clay. And I don't think they use insulation. The clay is the insulation, I believe, right?
And they really can't build in wet climates, obviously. They can't
Yeah, that one definitely seems like a dry climate build type of material.
Yeah, it is. It is more of a dry climate. Yeah. Okay. So do you like denim insulation? Like, what's your go-to insulation? Because this is a big question people always want to know.
I think the Pretty Good House consensus is like the default insulation we go to is cellulose, or it's a dense packed cellulose, because it's a recycled product that is the only thing it's treated with is like a borate salt that makes it flame retardant. And so it's very low in embodied carbon and upfront carbon, and it's a mostly organic material, except it's recycled. So there's that little bit to it. And we try to avoid spray foam. Tends to be the thing that builders gravitate towards because it's easy, because you can solve everything, just spray it down. And in fact, they can hire a subcontractor to come in and do it. But if you ever see that done, like they dress up, they're in a hazmat suit and they go in and they're mixing chemicals on site and spraying it in, and don't come in while we're doing this. And you're like, what am I putting in my house? And so we've done correctly. It should be an inert material when it's in there, but done incorrectly, it can be really, it can outgas for a really long time and be a problem. So and there's other reasons why we tend not to spray foam, and we also avoid like the XPS insulation, which is the extruded polystyrene because it's usually polystyrene by itself, like the foam board. Like you see it in construction sites, it's rigid. It's usually used for underground applications or like foundations, but you'll see it all over the place. But because it could be used almost anywhere, the companies treat it with flame retardants, and also the propellant agents that make that foam are like CO2 times 1300, I think. I could be wrong. There are different companies with different formulas. Like the Suprema brand is not nearly as bad as some of the other Dow brands or whatever. But if we have to use something like that, we'll use EPS, which is expanded like your styrofoam cup, instead of XPS. But we'd rather use like Glavel or a foam glass product underground, which is a newer product. In fact, Emily, I haven't even used it yet. I've proposed it like 3 times and it hasn't happened yet, but Emily did it. So high five.
Yeah, I've done it on a couple of projects recently. And what I love about the foam glass aggregate and Glavel specifically is their factories are also all renewable energy. So they're taking something, they're recycling it, they're making it into a product. And by doing it, they're also using their factories to not produce more carbon in the atmosphere, because there's other insulations like mineral wool or fiberglass. And mineral wool is basically melting rocks, which takes a lot of energy, right? So it's not inherently bad in your house per se with a good air barrier so that it actually works and doesn't filter things, but the carbon impact of that material is much higher. So we're also trying to think beyond that to how is this? So we use wood fiber. So you can get wood fiber in a couple of different ways. And there's also sheep's wool. That tends to be more expensive, but some people are kind of into that. So I have never used denim, and I'd really research that, because just like we talked about all of our other materials, like what's actually in denim, like I'm not sure how sustainable the denim industry really is. And so does it have other chemicals in the denim? And then you're stuffing that in your walls, right? So it would be great that people recycled it, maybe instead of just kind of throwing it. But like from an indoor environmental quality, like what is in it? Am I going to continue to breathe that?
Yeah, right. So are you going to get a button when you inhale? a zipper.
If you get a button when you inhale, you have really big holes in your wall.
You really have a bigger problem than the denim. No, it's really interesting. How many builders do you think are still using that pink fiberglass insulation? Like, is that still all of them?
Like 95%. We're throwing out statistics, right?
Let's just make them up. Just go with it.
I feel good about that one.
I feel good about that one. Yeah, that's what I thought, because I won't name names. I've talked about this before, but we live in Orange County. The Real House, if you've ever seen the Real Housewives of Orange County, one of the women, I'm not going to say who she is, but she lives like literally 2 miles from, and not that we live in her neighborhood, but her beautiful neighborhood is
she's on top of the hill. She's
maybe
on top
3 miles from here.
Okay.
Yeah, on the hill.
We're at the bottom.
We're at the bottom. And they built a massive, I mean, the biggest house I think they've actually built in Orange County, maybe. And it's like a hotel. And they were literally, she was showing pictures of it online. I see all this pink fiberglass insulation. And I'm like, wait, you've got a champagne button. I probably just gave away who she is. She has a button in her closet to push for champagne. So a little glass of champagne comes out to the closet while she's getting ready.
Wow.
That's a level I
That's like a whole nother.
I mean, come on now.
And like the ice cube maker that makes the round big ice cubes, the big square, every kind of size.
She saved money on getting the fiberglass.
Right.
So she
all of these things,
Yeah.
and then puts in fiberglass. It blows my mind, really. Like,
Well, it's the things that you don't see that are usually harder sells. Like your wall system is now much healthier and more robust and is going to protect you and make you more comfortable, huh? And some other builder might say, well, I can build you the same thing for like half the cost, or like, and they can't, by the way, but by substituting a couple of things. And then why would you cheap out there? Of all the places in your house to reduce costs, I mean, your building envelope, you get one shot to do that right. Maybe 2 if you're renovating or whatever, but getting your building envelope correct and getting your systems correct would be second to that. And then if you want to change your countertop, go for it. It's much more ephemeral, these other products, but that building envelope, man.
Yeah, that's your big investment. Yeah, that's your structure. And then all the other stuff is like, it literally is your foundation, and then everything's on top of that. So that's a great point. Put that money in, do the research, read your book for sure. Pretty Good House, A Guide to Creating Better Homes. Plug.
Fiberglass, I will say, like we've used it, but very sparingly, and we make sure it's formaldehyde free. They are, at least thanks to like LEED from 10 years ago, people are paying attention to where formaldehyde exists. Like you've mentioned the plywoods and stuff. Now you can buy cabinetry that's formaldehyde free. You can also buy a lot
that isn't, right?
That is.
You got to know to ask. Right?
That is not so great.
That's a good trigger though. Like if this is a synthesized wood product, it's held together with glue binders of some kind, and that could be formaldehyde, which we know is a carcinogen.
Kind of like BPA. When BPA became really like public awareness because of the sippy cups and the baby bottles, they were like, don't worry, we're getting rid of BPA. We now have BPS. And everyone's like, oh, good, it's BPA free. So kind of going back to that greenwashing, like, oh, good, it's safe, it's BPA free. They do this with PFAS too, right? But wait, what's the chemical that you now used? Why come we don't know? There's no information. They don't tell you. You've got to do deep.
We're just starting over with a new chemical. It'll be fine.
BPS and BPF are just the chemical cousins of BPA. So it's BPA free, but its cousin is.
Yeah, exactly. And the average consumer doesn't know that, right? So they don't know. They just see the greenwashing. And so they're like, yay, it's safe. So...
And I will throw out, in our book, we even espouse there's the 6 classes of chemicals that method. In fact, you can go to 6classes.org for any listener out there. And it's a great way just to it goes through a lot of these same chemicals we're talking about. And instead of trying to pick and choose, it really takes the tactic of avoid. Just avoid when you can.
Just avoid any of these things.
Solvents, don't use solvents unless you have to. Then you have to study and figure out what's in it. It's just like the mental method that we all have to start using to protect ourselves.
Right. We have to be our own detective and our own everything nowadays. I mean, we really do. And thanks to you guys writing a book, and it's such a great tool for consumers. So they don't have to spend umpteen years and go to get a science degree and an architect degree and all of this. You're doing the hard work for them. And hopefully our podcast is, and your podcasts helping people become aware so that it's not so overwhelming and that they can feel excited and inspired and have the tools. And I love, when I was reading your backgrounds and bios, one of you had talked about, we're not trying to create a perfect house. This isn't about perfection. And I thought that was such a great.
We're trying to create a pretty good house.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's where the title came from, right? It's
I thought it was another good plug.
Yeah.
No, sorry, guys.
Sorry.
It's the longest running joke we've been.
You guys are sick of it.
Doing that for
you're not laughing anymore.
No. Because we get the response when people don't get it, when they don't pick up on the joke. We had the good enough house, and it's no, that's not what this is.
It's gonna fall apart. Right. Yeah, no, but that's such a good point because you're always going to find little compromises. Sometimes you're choosing the lesser of the evil. Sometimes you're down to that with a particular, even in your household products, right? Sometimes you're just. People can get a little crazy and they'll be like, oh, but that is that. And I'm like, yeah, but you're stepping in the right direction and you're reducing your body burden, right? By making a healthier choice. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. We got to deal with preservatives over here or this over there. And so.
Yes. Or your budget. Your budget might be a part of that too. We can't all have champagne dispensers in our closets.
I asked Ron, he said no. I was like, right. When I get ready, I need my champagne.
We went in healthy building materials instead, right?
Right. So. You want to breathe healthy or you want champagne?
Ooh, I don't know. That's a tough one, Chris.
Oh
my gosh. Well, is there anything else you guys want to leave with our listeners? Any last little tips, advice?
They can go to prettygoodhouse.org if we can just keep on plugging things. It's too cheap to buy the book and you just want more free advice. Please go to that website, prettygoodhouse.org, where we've got a lot of information there as well, because we're not going to retire from this book, but we really want to move the needle on the quality of building out there and, help the environment, help people, help the planet.
And you are. Excellent job, you guys. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Yeah. And can people hire you if they don't, just to draw up a floor plan for another state, or do they have to be building in your area?
Well,
so I'm going to say that that's a complicated question. You don't actually have to have an architect to design houses all over the country. But if you are an architect, you have to be registered in the state that you are practicing in. So Chris and I are both, assume Chris is registered in more than one state, generally up here in New England too. So we can practice a new custom home in the states that we are registered in. I also shout out to several people who have custom design plan sets that are available for people to purchase for the right climate zones. So the other thing that I failed to mention earlier when you asked me about cost effectiveness is custom is always going to cost more. So if you don't have to have a custom house, start with some really great architect or designer led houses in your specific area. And You can start there, and the fewer changes you make, the more cost effective it will be. Those generally can go in other places, but be really careful and do them in the right locations, right? So we talked just a little bit about climate zone. Chris and I are both in a cold climate. So any houses that we design aren't going to be appropriate for Florida, right? Going to have an opposite effect. Some architects or designers can work in that event where there are plan sets that are available. But if you are an architect, generally you need to be licensed in the state.
Okay, that's really helpful. I never actually knew the answer to that. So listeners, head to their site, prettygoodhouse.org. If you are interested in getting more information and to get the book, we will put a link in the show notes. And to learn more about Chris Briley, find him on Instagram at Bryburn_architecture. And to learn more about Emily, find her on Instagram at Mottram Arc. That's MOTTRAMARCH.
And we'll have all the links in the show notes at ronalisa.com/podcast. Stay tuned next week, friends, and get ready to up-level your health. See you then. Bye.
This episode of the Healthy Home Hacks podcast has ended, but be sure to subscribe for more healthy living strategies and tactics to help you create the healthy home you've always dreamed of. And don't forget to rate and review so we can continue to bring you the best content. See you on the next episode.